Welcome to another Founder Wisdom podcast, podcasting edition, my favorite. We have Jim Fuhs with us. He is president and COO at Fusion Marketing. He's also co-host at Dealcasters Live and a bunch of other podcasts, which we're going to talk about. This pod is brought to you by podbar.com, my company, if you want to start, scale, or be invited to a podcast. Jim, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and your companies?
Yeah, so I guess I'm a little unique in the sense that I'm a retired Marine lieutenant colonel. Been retired for almost 14 years, actually the end of August, and so I wasn't a marketing guy. I was more in, you know, military government stuff, and then but I'd always really liked tech, and so I moved to Atlanta when I got remarried about 6 years ago, and about uh, 7 years ago, I started doing marketing. I was doing social media management, but I really got into video. And so I do a lot now with remote live stream production, with Dealcasters. We're actually doing it's live selling on Amazon, but we like to call it live solving, right? Because we're all solving problems for people. And I think that that's where a lot of businesses are missing a great opportunity. And so, you know, even though I'm retired in a sense, I don't know that to keep ourselves going that we can like just retire. I think our brains need to have something that's constantly making us move forward and excites us to get up every day.
And you started in the Marines. How did that shape you and build you into who you are today?
I think the self-discipline. I enlisted out of high school, so I went to boot camp. Then I went to college, got my commission, so I had to go through officer candidate school as well. So I got yelled at a lot, so I got used to that. And but then on the flip side, everything is about systems and processes in the military. It's being able to step in for that person that maybe falls by the wayside, or even the way we assign people, right? You're never going to stay in one place your whole career. You're going to move around. You're going to move up as you succeed. And so where I think that formed me and shaped me is understanding leadership for one, and how important it is to understand that even though you get that view that when you think of military leadership, like, oh, it's these people are yelling at each other. No, that's not the case. You learn that everyone is kind of has a different button, right, that makes them perform. And so understanding that as a business owner or in working with clients and figuring out like what's really going to help move things forward, I really think is what the Marine Corps helped me with. But I will say that I did have a portion of time where I struggled after the military because it was like, well, I'm not in the military anymore. I'm a regular person, so to speak, but it's a part of you, right? It gets into your DNA, and I think a lot of us have something that shaped our life, and for me, it was definitely the Marine Corps, getting me that self discipline and that drive to want to be the best.
Love it. And yeah, I was a SEAL in another life. I think parallel life in which I was born in US because I'm Canadian. Being yelled at, I never understood this part. Does it feel better for the instructor, or is it to kind of destroy the resistance of a young gun? Is it also to test his patience and his limit? If he replies, then he failed the test. And is it also that if he's captured by an enemy and if he gets mentally tortured and psychologically abused, he will learn to have that forever patience and resistance?
I think that's definitely part of it, and I think also, especially in the initial phases of training, as they're, you want to say, weeding everybody out because not everybody makes it, is you have to be willing to, in a sense, it's instant obedience to orders and not to question it, right? You've got to get it done. The questioning can come later because in the heat of the moment, when things are happening at a rapid pace, there's not time for a debate. And I think so. Sometimes even in business, I think we can get into this mindset of wanting like perfect information, right? When sometimes 80% is enough to make that decision. And in most cases, we're not going to be putting people's lives at risk. we can, adjust if we found out we maybe made a decision because we didn't have all the information, and that new information maybe helped us course correct. And I think we're even seeing that today. We were talking a little bit before the show about AI. AI is constantly changing how people are managing things and what they're going to do. And, as much as there's this fear of like, oh, AI is going to take away everybody's jobs, I don't think that's the case. I think it goes back to we have to constantly, and this is another military thing, adapt and overcome, right? AI is here. You got two choices. You can bury your head in the sand and you say, all right, I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to figure out how I can use it to leverage technology, leverage my business and move forward.
Right. Hmm. I do think that AI is gonna replace a bunch of folks that do not want to work, though. I think that's gonna happen sooner or later.
I
I
agree.
think like work was kind of imposed on us humans, and hey, I see the benefits of work. I think it's like a channel to your energy, right? Like, and it's also a growth channel. I do believe that you get enlightened as results. Would we have enough time to do everything to just chill like 24/7? Me, my definition of happiness is increasing 1% on a daily basis, so
Love that.
I love work, I love discomfort also. I love like crunch times when I just feel like shit, and I'm like low energy, and I'm angry, and you're able to push my buttons. I love these times because I know that growth is coming, and I know that I'm just a human. I'm not the overlord I think I am sometimes. It brings me back in the be humble class of things. You decided to start your businesses in between a couple of military roles, were a COO and a president. What was the decision to officially shift from the forces to being a full-time business owner?
I think part of it for me was I wanted to call the shots. I wanted control of my time. I think, I basically was told what to do or told people what to do for over 20 years. And even as an undergraduate, I was a business major. I've always had a fascination with business. I have a master's in acquisition and contracting. So I've always enjoyed business, seeing how things evolve, how things change, and how it provides opportunities for us if we're willing to take it. And so I found that when the last, company I worked for, I was getting in that situation where I felt like maybe you call a little bit of ego, that I knew more than my boss, but I was never going to be able to replace my boss unless I did things that I didn't want to do. And so that's when I made that decision. You know what? It's time for me to go out on my own, call my own shots, and that's what I've been doing. And I'm glad that I did.
And the podcast is somewhat a back end to this, or a front end, depending on how you want to see it. We're going to talk about that. But first, tell me a bit more about your agency. Who do you target? With what service? Where's the product market fit? And what's the price to pay for your expertise?
Yeah, so right now, really starting to focus on small to mid-sized businesses in the e-commerce space. I've started working with a company called eStreamly, that is a live streaming SaaS platform that allows you to go live on your website and do live selling. And so what I'm helping them do is produce these shows so that these, because there's a lot of people that, right, I want to go live, but I don't know how to do it. It's like I don't know how to make the they don't want to know how the sausage is made. They just know what they want to see at the end. And so I've been starting to work with a couple of companies through this partnership and help them get started, get that momentum going to where they can go live on their website as opposed to being on rented land. Because even though, like with Dealcasters being on Amazon, we're at the mercy of Amazon. And we've actually seen, in this last year that as they change the rules with, the influencer program and what videos people see, that impacts us and we don't have any control over what Amazon decides to do. So I think it's more about how do we, use video to empower us as businesses, because I think that more and more, I mean, just think of it with smartphones. People are, consuming video, right? They're not maybe consuming as much, and I know you love to read. They're not necessarily consuming as much when it comes to the written word, but they want to see things. They want to, listen to it. That's where the power of podcasting has come into play. And so, yeah, so we do that. I mean, we do more, it's like a project-based, approach, to pricing, because, sometimes you might be willing to say charge someone less because you can see where they're headed, where somebody that comes in with a larger budget, we're gonna, adjust that appropriately.
So, what was the thesis behind podcasting? Was it you listening to radio, or who knows, John Lee Dumas, one of the first podcasters back in the days, and be like, I want to have my own show? What was your thesis?
It's funny. I originally did not necessarily want to have my own show. I think what came of it is that I saw, like when Facebook, this is probably 2018, is like, well, we're going to start doing this Facebook Live. And so my thought is, if I'm going to ask you to do something, and this is maybe a little bit of the military mindset, is I have to be able to do it myself. So by me being able to go live and understand how things work, now I can come to you as a client and say, this is how you do it. It's one of those things where I think, sometimes, even in, if you want to say, the college professor world, where like you have someone academically telling you how to do something that's never actually done it themselves. And so I think that's, for me, a differentiator is, I guess I like to, walk the walk and talk the talk. And so I practice what I do. I don't just, put it off to someone else to do, for me.
And why podcasting? Why not focus on other channels?
I think that it's easier. It's a lower barrier to entry. I think it's also constantly changing. I like that from a learning standpoint, that it is, constantly changing, figuring out new ways to do things. As the technology increases, the flexibility we get to potentially, go and do things, remotely or anywhere, and not necessarily even be stuck in a studio. And I think we've even seen in the, I guess if you want to call it the television industry, especially with what happened with COVID, is they had to start to figure out, how are we going to do these broadcasts when, we can't get everybody in the studio. And so I think technology has really, and the internet specifically, has really opened opportunities for us to, even like we're doing right now, we're talking, you know, probably hundreds, if not thousands of miles apart, where, 10, 15 years ago, this would have been very difficult to do.
Do you how do you pick your guests, and how do you make sure to ask them great questions that will get the best out of them?
I think you have to do your research. I think it's a matter of, if you're going to interview an author, you should be, reading his book, looking at his book at a minimum, and asking questions about them, not necessarily, because they can kind of tell, right? And they can tell when you've taken the time. I think that also leads to a better interview, and it also, makes them feel like you actually care, that you're not just like going through the motions. So I take that, very seriously, and I also like to build relationships. And so a lot of times I'll build a relationship first before maybe approaching someone about, being a guest, or, vice versa. I think the same. I've had people ask me to be a guest as well.
Can you tell that I haven't prepared?
No, no, you're
Yeah.
doing great.
Yeah, but I'm weird. I think weirdness is how you get like explosiveness. Like me, I'm going fully from the hip. Um, and I have a hell of a hip, like I have, yeah, I practice so much, and for example, I'm at 500 CEOs interviews in less than 6 months. What does that do to a brain? It
Yeah.
really shapes it in a weird way, in the CEO letters way. Weird analogy right there. But I think Joe Rogan, the greatest interviewer alive, he has a bit of prep. which is what I do too. But 90% of it is winged. Some people
Mhm.
hate it, some people love it. I think you need to have an angle with your podcast. And I have probably like 8 angles to my podcast, which makes me very odd and unique in my category. For example, I record this on YouTube. I'm not using like Riverside fancy stuff. I'm going for scale rather than quality. So that this is also controversial. I'm going for speed, not long. So if you carve your niche and you keep carving, I think you will have your own little spot. Plus, obviously, I'm odd and I walk the talk. I'm a CEO myself. Now, um, you've checked my podcast most likely. You've prepared, right? Too.
Yep.
um, what should I improve for this podcast?
I actually think there's nothing wrong with your approach. I think having just that natural conversation, because obviously for you to even invite me, you at least there were things you saw that, hey, I'd like to talk to this person. I find him interesting. So I don't think that you necessarily have to be like, very strict script. I think that that in of itself makes your show unique. And I don't think we want everybody, we're not all Joe Rogan, I'm not going to try to be Joe Rogan, and I'm not going to be try to be, Charles Cormier, because you're you and I'm me, and we all have different approaches. I think for me, if anything, and I think this kind of goes along with what you're doing. I've been in Toastmasters for a few years, and we do these things called table topics, which is basically someone asks you a question out of the blue, and you got to answer it right then. And so I think that there's actually something to that, right? Can you think on your feet? As a CEO, right? You have to think on your feet sometimes, because you're going to have, somebody ask you a question and it's not now. You could say, "Hey, I don't know the answer. I'm going to get back to you." But you also sometimes may feel like I've got to give them some sort of an answer. So I think that's something that we have to think about. So I think your approach of having all these interviews, I find that very interesting to begin with. And it's goal setting too, right? Hey, I'm going to do this. You're driven to do it. And I think because you are, I think you'll succeed.
Thank you for that. That's a prophecy right there. Um, what are your goals for the remaining of this year? What's your focus?
Well, so my focus is to definitely get more companies involved with this live solving, and making it, getting more businesses to use video. And then I'm going to start a new show called Social Fusion. It's going to be, I haven't completely decided yet. I think it's going to be a little bit of podcast. It might be some video stuff like we're doing here. Uh, but it's my show, kind of like this is your show. And, I don't have to necessarily answer to anybody but the person in the mirror as far as where it's going to take me. Because I think, and you may see this as well, we have so many people like, well, I want to start a podcast. How do I monetize it? Well, first of all, you've got to have good content, and you have to have people, that want to take that content on. Otherwise, why am I going to give you money? And I think there's too much of this, you know, this creator economy. I think it's great, but you know, I like to say anybody can have a podcast, anybody can have a live stream. It doesn't mean it's going to be good. And I think that's one of those things that people have to, be honest with themselves sometimes, and say, well, nobody listens to my show or nobody watches. It's like, have you actually had someone that maybe is unbiased tell you the truth about how your show is? If your show's not that good, it's not going to grow. And it's not that they can't do it. It's maybe that they need to put more work into themselves before they're ready to take that next step.
Right. It's just constant improvement, right? The 1% per day.
Yes.
Don't give up on something, but also don't be an idiot. Like try to improve on a daily basis. Ask your audience for feedback, read books, grow that brain of yours, and you will eventually get there. I think it's also about the expectations. Most people expect to succeed on day 10, completely rubbish.
Right.
Me, I expect to succeed in this podcast maybe in 1.5 year. I might like have a decent following. And I'm supercharging the whole process. If I wouldn't, it would probably take me 10. I'm
Right.
very patient. Last question, which I started asking today. You're on your deathbed. What will have you done in this life that will have been worthwhile to you, and what legacy do you want to leave?
I think for me, the thing I want to be remembered for is being a good person and being a good father and eventually grandfather. That's what's the most important thing to me, because all these other things, in a sense, the material things are meaningless. I think even as I've gotten older, it's like I don't need to have, make the most money, have the nicest this or that. It's really about, spending time with those people that you care about and enjoying the moment, enjoying experiences as opposed to enjoying things.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Jim. Where can we find out more about you and about your agency?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Jim Fuhs, or you can go to my website, fusionmarketing.com, and that's going to be doing some, we're going to be doing some updates to that. So hopefully in the next couple of months, you're going to see a lot more coming out of the website as well. Or check us out on dealcasters.live if you want to see what we're doing over on Amazon.
And I am Charles Cormier, host of founderwisdompodcast.com. This is a wrap with Mr. Jim.